My name is Savannah Reed, and here is my garden. It has successfully given my home a significant source of life. It's not much outside of your typical garden. Tomatoes, cucumbers, lettuce, and squash. It's green, it's lush, it's missing something. You see, I started this garden in efforts to heal myself, not just with a nutritious diet as one would expect, but a mental recovery. I've been without many friends or family since I lost my job as an assistant manager at Tech Talk. I was told it was my can't-do attitude for resolution. I guess they were trying to say I couldn't endure my problems well. Most of my friends worked there, but I quickly lost touch with them afterwards. I've been so lonely here, but the garden has become somewhat like a friend in a way. It nurtures me just as much as I nurture it. It depends on me, and I take the initiative to make sure that she's safe from all of the harsh elements. All of this has been helpful, but I can't help but still feel a need to be heard. I heard that plants can be very receptive to music, but I needed assurance. I needed to be certain I was received. I noticed the mailman at the door, but he was gone before I made it outside. I grabbed my small pile of envelopes from the small metal bin and went inside. Aside from the monotonous bills and weight loss ads, pizza flyers, something bizarre came today. A small unmarked bag of seeds. The bag was transparent, revealing small, unassuming black pebbles. I wasn't sure what would grow from it, so I popped them in a cup of dirt with a splash of water to see what would sprout its green little head. Nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. It was only a few hours later that I could see little peach-colored beans emerging from the soil. I was amazed. Plants don't just do that. I went to my bedroom to grab my phone to look up the species, but nothing in the online forums explained such a plant, nothing remotely close to such an exotic hue. I didn't want to plant them in the garden because they could be invasive. There's been a lot of rumors circulating of crop-killing seeds shipped from other countries as some sort of mail-order attack. I needed to get them in the separate flower pots before their roots cracked the cup barely containing them. I separated each one out for their own individual pot of soil, all seemingly fairly contained for the moment. I considered them safe on the patio till I can figure out what they are. I went back inside to make some coffee to get my mind off the mystery plants in the backyard, something to pump a little normalcy back in my day. I loaded up a video game while the water was boiling. A Knight's Blade, an online dungeon crawler that has honestly eaten way too much of my time. It hasn't been the same since Helen stopped getting online. Her and the rest of the gang stopped inviting me to game lobbies ever since Helen thought it would be a good idea to kick me from the guild and raid my in-game home. It's a lot like what they did to my real-life home when I got to invite them over, raided my food and beer before dashing off to the next thing to keep them occupied for the night. I couldn't keep up with them, and eventually it showed. My home was a wreck after they left, and by the time I finally had it the way I would like, they come back to litter more beer bottles and pizza boxes. Before too long, they couldn't hang at such a mess of a home, so they simply stopped coming by. I wish I could have just had someone in my life that gave me energy rather than take it away. At that moment, I closed my eyes and thought about it. I focused hard on what I wanted in someone, what I needed to fill the lonely, cold void in my chest cavity. Someone that genuinely cared. I knew it wouldn't be a solution, but sometimes I really needed to sit down and remind myself what I deserved. My focus is broken by the sound of the kettle whistling. I quickly head over to flick the burner off when I see that the plants have grown even more since I left. I can see small peach-colored nodes forming beneath the leaves. I poured the boiling water into the coffee press before walking outside to get a closer look. The plants now stand about a foot tall with these strange, fleshy fruits, budding about the size of my fist. The stem and the leaves are also peculiar. They were of a more pale, semi-translucent hue with crimson veins peeking from inside. I grasped the fruit-like nodes, and to my surprise, it was warm to the touch. I tenderly pulled at the node till it let go with a pop. I took it inside and laid it on my cutting board. I pulled from my drawer my favorite butcher knife, and I sharpened the blade to a polished edge. I firmly held the large node in place like a beefsteak tomato, sizing it up with my blade. I tried to let the weight of the blade do my cutting, but it needed some extra attention. I grasped the back of my hand and firmly pressed down on the handle until I heard a nerve-wracking crack sound. I pulled the knife away, and the two pieces fell cut side up, revealing what appeared to be a pit made of spherical bone that was surrounded by semi-translucent jelly-filled skin and shielding tiny burgundy and violet organ-like blossoms in the center. This was astounding. I could hear ceramic pots breaking outside. No! I ran outside, tripping on a patio chair that was thrown at my leg. The chair legs wrapped around my ankles, and I could feel my own weight turn against me as the bones of my ankles gave in with a violent crack. I looked up to see the assholes from Tech Talk wrecking my garden. I pleaded for them to stop, but they just kept breaking pots and filling bags with their stolen produce. They stomped on my flower garden, tossed the new potted plants through the greenhouse windows, destroyed my pumpkin patch. The look on their faces expressed no excitement or dismay, just satisfied stares as they destroyed my last shred of happiness. I now realized that they weren't just horrible friends, but actual monsters that exist only to do damage in my life. One of my neighbors watched with a disgusted expression on her face, but closed the blinds in avoidance of the situation. Maybe she was hoping someone else would help. Maybe she didn't care at all. They rip the strange fruit and take bites before spitting it out, even though some actually swallowed it. Outraged that I would plant something so putrid, they threw the fruit at me. The seeds in them made it feel as though I was being pelted by baseballs. Welts immediately started forming on me. I tried to strike one, but his friends intercept me with heavy punches to the face and kicks to the stomach, and they laugh it off before running away. I had nothing left in my garden but the bony pits from the fruit thrown at me. I pushed them into the fertile soil and patted them down. I laid there on that dirt patch, a bloodied mess, crying for what felt like hours. I felt more useless than ever. They took everything. Everything. I wish with everything inside me that I could turn the tables for a change, take everything from them for once. I go inside and lay on the couch, filthy and defeated. I close my heavy, exhausted eyes, unsure how I'm going to handle tomorrow. I drift away into an uncomfortable slumber, full of horrific nightmares. It was so vivid, I could almost feel what was happening. Everything was dark. I couldn't see anything. I was surrounded by mud. It was so heavy and cold and wet. I would dig with my hands until I made it to the surface. And from there, things got confusing and terrifying. Flashes of different places and people, all of them screaming, heads, arms, and legs torn from their bodies by strange pink, fleshy hands covered in dark purple veins and lacking fingernails. Those hands were responsible for tearing every single one of them down, and as I came to recognize them as the ones that ruined my life, I felt happy, victorious even. I woke up in my bed. I was clean. I don't remember doing any of this. Did I sleepwalk? I got the strangest feeling. I got dressed and ran outside to see that several large mounds of dirt were in the back. I took a closer look to see that some strange, pungent fluid was on patches, with a small pink sprout coming from the center of each. Those assholes might have come back to finish it off. I just felt like I would have heard something. I go inside and go about my day, trying to get over yesterday by cooking a meal for myself. I start up a soup with some of the dried vegetables and chopped onions, with a variety of spices from the cupboard and beef bone from the freezer to boil. Hopefully this will help my soul some. By the time my steaming soup is ready, I decided to enjoy it with a pile of books to burn through the day. With each steaming sip of the broth, I'm brought a little more peace. My first book was a horror anthology, 3 Tales of Terror by H. Hayes. The Gorger absolutely crawls under my skin every time I read about that monster in the final story. Each page brings me closer to drifting off. I find myself in the woods, walking in someone's backyard. I feel like myself, but once I saw my odd fleshy hands, I knew I was stuck in that same horrible nightmare again. It's dark, but I can make out the patio door, and windows light my way to the house. I walk closer to the patio door and notice a familiar face. It was one of the guys that ruined my garden. He was just sitting there watching TV, stuffing his greedy face with a greasy cheeseburger and slurping on his can of beer, laughing, sending bits of meat and beer flying from his disgusting mouth. I take a rock and bash his car window and hide in the bushes nearby, waiting for him to come back to investigate. He comes out with a handgun. He pulls the slide of his gun arrogantly back for me to think he was prepared. He has no idea. I lunge out of the bushes at him, but he reflexively turns and shoots me twice in the chest. I feel the blows, but it isn't enough to stop me. I look down and run my hands across the 2 wounds, rubbing the sticky blood between my fingers, and I flick it out of his face, causing an acid reaction in his face and eyes. Finally, a monster equal to these poor excuses for human beings. He screams in agony, falling to his knees, dropping his gun in a desperate attempt to wipe it out of his eyes, only to have it start eating into his hands too. I shove my hand into his mouth, way past the wrist to keep him quiet. I feel him gurgle and try to bite me, but my forearm kept his mouth compliant. The panic in his eyes increased as I waited for him to suffocate. I twisted my fist to make the experience as painful as I could manage. I could feel the walls of his throat constrict and convulse in a dance of true hysteria. His body twitches and resists in its final moments before going still once and for all. I start to fade away again when I find myself in my own bed. Could it have been a dream? It's still dark outside. I make my way to the backyard and notice more sprouting plots and a body by one of the new ones. It was the thing from my dreams. It was me? Or was it while I was sleeping? It was only faintly moving. It had no face. Its skull was unusually smooth, with no place for eyes, nose, or a mouth even. No hair or nails. I held my friend in my arms and said that it was okay to leave now. The bad guys are gone. It moved slower before going limp and motionless. I could never thank you enough for what you did for me. I made a grave for my friend in the middle of the garden, a place to rest after all its sacrifice. Before leaving to head inside, I noticed the plot's pink sprouts have grown 3 times their original size and have formed small brains wrapped in flower petals and small finger-like leaves. It departed, but not without leaving me the best gift, friends of my own.